Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh of Inner Skilled. Today I have Dean Graves with me. Dean, what's up today? How's it going?
It's going great, and just watching the trauma over the imminent hurricanes in Florida.
Wow, yeah, that's we just had the huge one in North Carolina too, and are around that area, and yeah, I've seen some footage online. It's wow, I don't know really what to say. Um, Maybe we can get into that a little bit later, maybe not. I'm going to welcome Dean back here though for the other time I've had him on twice actually, and so we did kind of a more general one on another outlet, and then we did a specific one on the illusion of stillness for the most part. I'm sorry, the illusion of movement.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Wow. Yeah. So anyway, I'm glad to welcome back. And today we're going to talk about the enigma of consciousness. No small topic here, consciousness, you know? But before we do that, I just, for those who don't know who Dean Graves is and Dean Graves' story, who is Dean Graves and what kind of work does he do?
I ask myself those same questions daily. um, I am, at this point in my life, I have become a messenger for those who are seeking to advance themselves along the Enlightenment path. And my resource is the product of my own research that is principally provided to me by my higher self, um, which I talk to my higher self daily. This was a capability that emerged incrementally and accelerated as I continue to heal myself. I teach meditation. Mindfulness is not so much something that you teach as, if you teach someone and guide them through meditation, the mindfulness kind of emerges. I'm a mental health counselor. I have written 4 books now, working on the 5th one, and I conduct a couple of podcasts, all of which have the same objective of providing people with the information and the guidance that they need to live a more fulfilling life and experience less stress and progress along the enlightenment path.
Well, right on. And I say we have a lot in common with, very interested in enlightenment and meditation, healing, and well being, and service as well. So let's define terms here. What would you say, how would you define enlightenment? I know it kind of gets overused, perhaps watered down these days. I always like to have kind of what you feel that is, or how would you describe that, I think, as a term here. And I would just imagine, if I had to guess, that this enigma of consciousness, exploring consciousness, kind of examining and investigating consciousness and helping teach about it and explain it, experience it, and maybe know the truth of it ties in to enlightenment. So I think these terms, it will be helpful to kind of define and have a groundwork for what we're talking about here, enlightenment, and then consciousness. That's a huge one. That'll probably be much of the rest of our talk, I'd imagine, one way or another.
Well, the enlightenment is not mutually exclusive, or it is not exclusive of discussion of consciousness. So when you talk about one, you're really talking about both. Um, Enlightenment is a very misunderstood concept. Most people perceive enlightenment to be a destination because of the successes that the Buddha had. And the Buddha was a model. It was his incarnation was very purposeful to provide us with a guide. But enlightenment is a path. It is a process It is not a destination. It certainly has attributes that appear to us to be a destination because of our limited perspective. And we exist within a range of consciousness. The range of consciousness that we exist within is a very elementary range of consciousness. And there is much ahead of us that we will inevitably experience. But in this range of consciousness, we are guided significantly by an archetypical mind. And an archetypical mind is a blueprint for how we will interpret our experiences. An experience is a single thought. And so as we process thoughts, we, because of our limited perspective, are compelled to go through the steps of this archetypical mind with every thought that we experience and make an assessment about that thought. Once we make an assessment about that thought, then we use the fruit of that assessment to modify our perception of self. And then we process the next thought from the changed perception of self that we just modified as a result of how we processed the previous thought. The enlightenment is synonymous with the evolution of consciousness. So as we are processing thoughts, then we are wandering down the enlightenment path. If we are experiencing significant stress in our lives, then we have invariably wandered off the path and into the weeds. And so the more that we can recognize that we have gotten off of the path and get ourselves back on the path, then we are healing the self and moving forward along the path of enlightenment, or the path of the evolution of consciousness, whichever you prefer to phrase it. Now, what that evolution consists of, the nature of creation is very structured and it is very purposeful. It began with the one infinite creator that projected an analog projection of itself, with the only distinction being that the analog projection of the creator was distorted with the concept of free will. Free will, again, defining terms, is a very misunderstood concept. Certainly we have the choice to turn right or to turn left, or to do all of the myriad things that we do, but those are all the product of free will. Free will is the perception of separation. And so because the analog projection of the creator perceived itself as separate from the one infinite creator, it was conceptual, or is conceptual, and it was with the same abilities as the one infinite creator. It began to have experiences initially interacting with the one infinite creator, and thereby fulfilling the purpose of creation. The purpose of creation, very succinctly, being the desire of the one infinite creator to know itself by experiencing itself. The analog projection of the creator is the creator as the subject. The original, the one and only actual one infinite creator, is the creator as the object, and that established the first subject-object relationship in creation. The one infinite, or the creator as the subject, is consciousness. And in order to explore itself as completely and deeply as possible, as is the purpose of creation, began to create a hierarchy of consciousness by increasing the intoxication of free will. And by that, I mean the more free will that you perceive yourself to have, the more intoxicated you become, because you perceive yourself as even more separated from the Creator. It works very much like whiskey. If you drink too much whiskey, then you lower your awareness, and in lowering that awareness, you do stupid things. But you learn, usually the next morning after you sober up. But it is a process of learning. And so creation is the process of sending consciousness as far away from the Creator as possible. And it goes all the way down to the most minute points of possibility. And consciousness's journey is to sober from that free will intoxication, and through that sobering, we eventually return in unity with the one infinite Creator.
Okay, so there's a lot here, a lot, so that's good. I'll start back at the beginning with enlightenment, and it is seemingly like a paradox or a contradiction, perhaps, that, and I love the metaphor of it being a path, because that's great, especially in the conditioned. It seems to be a path. However, usually a path implies that it does have a destination. However, I will agree with you that enlightenment is not necessarily a destination, not a destination. From my understanding, limited understanding, because I'm not there yet, obviously, is that it's more of a realization. That enlightenment is a realization. It has more to do with like the unconditioned. You know, these are some of the Buddhist synonyms. The unailing. You know, the unborn. The deathless. So these are kind of some synonyms for what's known as nibbana, and that would what some people would be call enlightenment, but it seems almost as a realization. Now, the next thing you mentioned is the experience is likened it to thought. Okay, so I just have the question first off is, in my experience, I've had experiences without thought. So I think we need to define what thought is. Is it like a word or an image? We have the thinking mind, but we can also train the mind to experience, right, without thinking, right? We can just, for example, feeling, right? We can feel a pleasant feeling, a painful feeling, or a feeling that's neither painful or pleasant. And of course, the mind can then add a thought to it, right? It can then add a thought and say, okay, this is pleasant, this is unpleasant. Just, for example, body sensations. But if we tune into body sensations, they can change quite rapidly, right? From pleasant to unpleasant. And we don't necessarily have to label them with a thought. So what do you mean? What's meant by this experience, that experience is thought?
When you note a body sensation, is that not also a thought?
Right, but what I'm saying is we don't have to note them, right? We can experience without noting. Right?
I would disagree. We are obligated by virtue of the level of consciousness that we experience to interpret every thought. No experience, no thought comes to us with emotion on it. Every experience is absolutely neutral of any emotion, and that is what we apply by virtue of this adjudication of whether it feels good or doesn't feel good. And that, by the way, is all that there is to an emotion. There is no emotion other than our personal judgment as to whether this thought that I'm thinking right now feels good or it doesn't feel good. If it doesn't feel good, then that is stress. That in and of itself is stress. And stress is a spectrum. So obviously we have some thoughts that are inconsequential. They're not enough to really ponder over. And then there are others that are extremely stressful. It's still stress. It's just on that spectrum of our interpretation of the experience.
Yeah, that's right. Because I mean, we can experience something unpleasant, but in the body, but the mind doesn't necessarily have to add another layer on top of it, thinking, "Oh, it shouldn't be here. This is so horrible. Why is this unpleasantness happening to me?" And so that's like another layer added on top of the originally unpleasant sensation, right? And
Well,
what about thoughts? And then let's define thought if we can. That's another huge fascinating thing when it comes to consciousness. What is a thought? Where does it come from? And we can, through meditation, we can see thoughts arising. That we don't really say, okay, I want to think this thought, right? Things will just kind of percolate up and bubble up every once in a while without me saying I want to think this thought. It's probably better to also throw in here mental activity, or there's thinking and then there's thoughting, and the mind just kind of thoughts, from time to time without a me saying, okay, I want to think this thought. There will just be phenomena occurring,
Well, do like you did. I'm going to step back, and
Sure.
we're referencing and talking about the mind. What is a mind?
Yeah.
We presume that we are, or we're told that we're a mind, body, spirit, but very few, if any, ever really ask what is a mind.
Yes.
And science presumes that the mind is a mysterious product of the brain, which is not at all the case. The mind is nothing more than a bundle of beliefs. That's all a mind is. A body is the product of the mind. The condition of the body, especially, is a product of how we have interpreted our experiences, interpreted our thoughts. The actual experiencer and the energizer of the nature of our experience is our spirit. But most people at this range of consciousness that we all are sharing at this point in time are unable to access or unwilling to access their spirit. And so the mind becomes an intermediary decision maker that adjudicates these thoughts as whether they feel good or don't feel good. We also have the erroneous presumption that our spirit is our spirit, that it is assigned to us, just like we join the military and they give us a uniform, and that's our uniform, even though it looks like everybody else's. That's not the case. The spirit is the spirit of the one infinite creator. It is scaled down in our perception because of our inability, our limited capacity to recognize more than the deluded or diluted image of the spirit. And so every experience that we have is simultaneously experienced by all of the consciousness that is above us on our return path to the Creator. And when we talk about a mind, what we are using, what you and I are using right now to discuss these topics is our ego mind. And it is what we create when we are incarnated based upon our experiences. It is a bundle of beliefs that is interpreting the nature of our experiences. We also have that is, in effect, it is available to us if we exert the effort in order to contact it, we have the mind of our metaphysical consciousness pattern, which is we are an analog projection of our consciousness pattern that is enduring and is the heart of our evolutionary journey. We also have layers of minds that are accessible to us and are us simultaneously as you go up the consciousness scale. It is improbable that we will have contact with those or be able to use those at this range of consciousness, but it is possible. There's no prohibition against it. No one has any rules that say, no, you can't contact that higher mind. You just don't have the capabilities of doing it. Now, what the Buddha was a wanderer, and what a wanderer is a higher consciousness, and in the Buddha's case, actually a sixth density consciousness. We're in third density. It was a sixth density consciousness, which is the beginning layer of what are deemed to be creator beings, and projected an analog projection of itself into our experience, into our range of consciousness, for the purpose of being a guide, a model, as well as a messenger for us to emulate. When the Buddha ceased being the analog projection, it simply integrated back to its metaphysical self, which was this sixth density creator being. The experiences that we are having have a curriculum, and that curriculum is to do a number of things. One of the more strategic things that we are compelled to do is make a choice of whether we are going to polarize service to self or service to others. Those polarizing service to self are choosing a path, is considered the indirect path through the next stages of its evolution. Those choosing the service to others path are choosing the direct path that will lead eventually to reunification with the Creator. Those choosing the indirect path, the service to self path, are choosing to enhance this ego that we create, this hierophant that we're obligated to create, to the point that it isolates itself more and more and more from the Creator and the other aspects of creation. The exact opposite occurs for those choosing the service to others path. They advance by surrendering their perception of separation, this free will, and thereby allowing their authentic self to more completely emerge and to eventually reunite with the Creator. And so everyone is on the enlightenment path, whether they're aware of it or not. We have made the progression along the path that we have allowed ourselves to accomplish. So it doesn't require awareness to be on the path, but it does require awareness in order to advance along the path. And so that is one of the essential elements of meditation teachings that I emphasize, is we all have awareness while we are in our undecided phases. We are in a stage of chaos, and we are trying to manipulate the world around us in order to get more of what we like. Our awareness is pointed outside of us, because I have to watch your reactions to me to see how effective my hierophant is in getting me more of what I like. In order to effect healing, and what meditation does is it allows us to invert that same awareness inwardly and begin the exploration of ourself, which is how we fulfill our purpose in creation. At this range of consciousness, we are tasked with awakening, which is nothing more than saying, what I've been doing isn't working, I need to do something else. Then we become aware, and then to graduate from this range of consciousness, we will become awareness. And that is like learning the curriculum of third grade so you can do fourth grade work. If you don't learn the curriculum of third grade, you won't be able to do the work of fourth grade. Earth is in an interesting stage of its development right now. A third density experiences, which is what we still are, what we have been participating in and what we are still participating in, has a defined time period, and it is approximately 75,000 years. That experience ended in February of 2016, and we began a new third density experience. But we also began a concurrent fourth density experience. And virtually all the children that have been born since mid-2000s, 2005, 2006, somewhere in there, some before, but not many, are fourth density beings. They've graduated from third density. And they're just now reaching the age of maturity, where they're beginning to assume responsibilities and things of that nature. They will, a third density experience is also running sister, in parallel or in conjunction. We're commingled at this point. But the bifurcation that we're experiencing socially is the bifurcation of the consciousness levels. And that will continue for several generations. As the fourth density matures, they will segregate themselves from the third density population, and we will have two consciousness ranges, both sharing the earth experience but not interacting. Once we get to that point of separation, then fourth density will not be detectable by third density, and fourth density will be isolated until such point as they are able to shield themselves from detection by third density. But the plan is, the ambition is that because the fourth density children are going to be raised by third density parents, that the higher consciousness of the fourth density will influence third density parents to the degree that they're willing to be influenced. But the children that the fourth density children populate the world with will be initially third density, but they'll be raised by fourth density consciousness. And so the hope is that will be a stimulus for third density to the new third density experience to propel itself forward along the enlightenment path, the consciousness evolutionary path. But it will still be third density and a separate fourth density experience.
For those that don't know your definition of density too, let's put that in there along with dimensions, because I know some teachers and systems, they define density and dimensions differently.
Well, the many higher consciousness beings use density and dimension interchangeably, but that's difficult for us to understand. A density is a range of consciousness, and there are 8 ranges of consciousness. We're in third density, so we're very low on the scale. A dimension, for explanation purposes, I describe, if you think of a density as a mile, and a dimension is an inch. And so each range of consciousness is subdivided into essentially an infinite range of dimensions that we vacillate when you consider behavior of an individual over the course of a lifetime. They are sometimes more conscious and sometimes less consciousness, and so we essentially oscillate among the dimensions with the objective of elevating the median range of that dimension participation until that median range reaches adequate advancement in order to graduate to the next range of consciousness.
So let's talk about some of these higher levels of consciousness, even beyond the 3 and 4, and then you've mentioned 5 and 6, I think, but there's some beyond that. And with this, I would like to what blocks this? I'm guessing, other than our intoxication with free will, I'd imagine our choices, especially our actions and speech with intention. I think that might play effect in here. Of course, perhaps one's if anyone has any interest in this. I mean, if people don't see a value in it, I could imagine that that might play into it as well. Of course, you mentioned service too. So what are some of these determining factors? Because in my understanding, I don't know if I leaning on a different definition of consciousness, but this is the version I know is just to be aware of something, to know something is happening. There's the experience and what's being experienced, right? There's the knowing and what's being known, the observation and what's being observed. So yeah, when that knowing of experience is there, then that's there's a knowing in what's being known. And so I this kind of, you mentioned awareness, and that sounds more like what your definition of awareness is. But this notion of consciousness is that it seems impermanent, right? Because and then in the fact that I can't really, or if it belonged to the self, or some kind of self or something, then it could be dictated or said, okay, let consciousness be like this, may it be like this. But in experience, we can't really dictate how we want consciousness to be, right? It's not controllable. Like you say, we lose consciousness. Sometimes we have seemingly access to higher levels of consciousness. Sometimes it seems pretty, I don't know, flat. Other times it seems more heightened. And so this also ties into a notion of self. So I'm going to ask you about this definition of self, because I don't really see a core self, a core unchanging self. It's always in a state of constant flux, this experience of what we consider a self, and we don't really own it or whatever. I mean, I can't own, however we slice it. And then throwing a lot out here too, perception, our perception of how things are. I think that's enough for now, but I have a few other, I've got a list here, Dean. So I'm really interested in all this stuff, and hearing your teachings. And
our perception of self is our limiting factor. In this range of consciousness, it's described as we begin as an individual, and we end this range of consciousness as an individual. We perceive ourselves as an autonomous being, and we end this range of consciousness also perceiving ourselves as a autonomous being, but less so. Because we are obligated to create this hierophant, this perception of self that is false, it initially causes us great turmoil. We begin in what is considered to be, or what is described as, primordial darkness, which simply means that we don't know anything, and that we are perceive ourselves to be in constant motion, and motion is change, but also extremely separated and unconscious. And one of the more elementary tasks that we have is to overcome that unconsciousness. And once we do that is when we avail ourselves of the possibility of having that awakening. And I don't know that we can say that here is the mile marker that you reach when you overcome that unconsciousness. You just know it when you've overcome that unconsciousness, and begin to assume, you really must assume responsibility for your own advancement and your own healing. The stress, the unpleasantness that we experience is always, but it becomes within our awareness the tool that we must use in order to heal ourselves. I explain to my meditation students, almost everyone comes to meditation running away from the stick. The stick hurts and it doesn't feel good, and we want relief from the stick. And then you reach that point where you have that delightful experience in meditation, and your motivation transforms from running away from the stick to chasing the apple or the gold ring or whatever metaphor that you want to use. But what is changing throughout this process is our perception of self, our autonomous perception of self. And so the healing process and the enlightenment path is a twofold process that are not, they're intertwined. We must heal the emotional baggage, which is nothing more than the lessons, the homework assignments that were given to us to learn that we didn't learn at the time that we had the experience, but also to begin to become aware of the beliefs that we've incorporated into this hierophant mind, this ego mind, and begin to throw those out. And as we do, then we are advancing along that enlightenment path because we're surrendering our free will intoxication. We're sobering from our free will intoxication. Now, the next range of, and one of the other criteria, in addition to making the choice of whether we're going to follow the service to others path or the service to self path, is we are obligated to open our fourth metaphysical chakra. And that is the precursor, in addition to choosing the path that we will follow, to graduating to fourth density. And fourth density begins essentially where we left off in third density, and it will conclude with our surrendering of our autonomous perception as an individual and forming what is called a social memory complex. The social memory complex becomes our perception of self, and it is comprised of a multitude of others that have achieved that same level of evolutionary advancement. The rest of evolution is a continuation of that we more and more surrender that perception of autonomy and become aware that we are a larger and larger and larger social memory complex until that completely dissolves and we reunite with the Creator. One of the things that occurs in the seventh density, which is the first density below the Creator as the subject. Creator as the subject is the eighth density. The Creator, or the seventh density, 5 inherent characteristics become delineated of the one infinite Creator. And those are awareness, love, wisdom, unity, and stillness. And our range of consciousness is the first experiential density, and we are tasked with exploring awareness, which is what we're doing by having our experiences, and tasked with becoming awareness in order to prepare to do the work of fourth density. Fourth density does the same thing with love, and it is hierarchical because you have to build the floor before you build the walls, you have to build the walls before you build the roof, and so forth. And so fifth density is wisdom, sixth density is unity, seventh density is stillness, and of course the eighth density is the one infinite, or the Creator is the subject. And so the criteria that is preserved after each one of our incarnations is what we have learned about those 5 inherent characteristics. We are all of those inherent characteristics right now. Our capacity to recognize that and to experience that is limited because of our low level of consciousness. And that's why we are tasked with becoming awareness at this range of consciousness in preparation to do the work of fourth density, which is the same exploration in becoming love.
Now, is all this locked in? I mean, is this like set, and then I don't know if it makes sense to apply a time period. I mean, could all this change? Like, maybe the higher levels get switched around, or another quality, a reversed order, and then how detailed can this get? And then and how much can it change? And I'm not too familiar with the law of one. I think that's where this notion of the social memory complex comes into. But I also wanted to get your take on, what do you think about, like, I don't know, imposters or someone else giving teachings, pretending to be one's higher self, perhaps another entity, or wherever the information comes from, how pure and accurate it is versus potential infiltrations, potential distortions, either deliberately from maybe another being or from one's interpretation. I mean, where does discernment play into this? And I don't know how to really ask that in a beneficial way, but you kind of get my picture here. How?
Yes, and
Okay.
yes, there are. Uh, when you choose to follow the service to self path, in order for us to continue to participate in creation, in all the levels below 6 density, the creator being densities, it is necessary for us to receive a constant flow of intelligent energy, which is a distortion, but that is how we are fueled in order to continue to participate in creation in general. Those choosing to follow the service to self path are choosing to isolate themselves from the source of that intelligent energy, but they still have to have it. They have to have that to maintain their posture in service in creation. And so the only other really place that they can get it is from each other, which is not real productive because none of them have an adequate source. And so we, in third density, throughout all of creation, become the Goldilocks porridge, because we have enough energy that is worth their while in stealing it from us, but we're not smart enough to know that we shouldn't give it away. And so we have tremendous influence from those service to self entities desiring to deceive us by false information, by distortion of information, by simply domination and subjugation, in order to extract the intelligent energy that they need from us to sustain their own continuation in creation. And so we have tremendous, if you think everything from the concept of debt, to the concept of religions, to the concept of whatever, is all at the behest of the influences of those beings that need to deceive us in order to extract the intelligent energy.
This is a really good point, and this is kind of definitely interested in this. There is another seeming potential paradox here, because those of us on service to others, I'll use that terminology too. Part of that is being generous. Generosity, and helping others, right? So then you have bad actors that can come and kind of potentially try to take advantage of that, and try to take advantage of one's good nature and compassion too. So how do we not? And then how does that not give way to anger sometimes? Because if we're getting deceived, it's can potentially go into anger and getting taken advantage of and walking over, especially when we have a good heart and want to help. So like, what is the best method of approach for those who are doing that? And then also it could potentially interfere with our inclusivity, right? And this notion of greater separation as well. So there's some paradoxical things here that I would like some advice on, and how to deal with these. Yeah.
You used the reference of the Buddha and Mara. You're familiar with Mara, and Mara is the personification of a service to self entity of more advanced consciousness. They also are in the consciousness path, and the Buddha's recognition of Mara was, you're still part of me. We're still part of the Creator, and I have sympathy for you, and I feel sorry for you. That kind of oversimplifies it. But the Buddha was still there to teach Mara of their shortcomings.
He often said, "I see you, Mara. I see you." They would just say
you recognized them.
Yes,
you recognized them, and by recognizing them, you depolarized them.
Yeah. You call them out, but it's also that recognition is a compassionate thing. If someone's in a state of suffering and in pain, that's the first step of compassion, is actually giving recognition. Because there's, I know even in my own experience, when I don't recognize what's going on, don't acknowledge what's going on, that pain continues. I think the first steps of that is this acknowledgement of what actually is.
Exactly.
So good, great point. Yep.
Yeah, but they are still part of the Creator. They retain the same higher self, even though they deny the higher self. They still retain the same higher self as their guide through the process. The people that are the most, we may describe as the most horrendous actors, are still extensions of us. They're still consciousness. And so we learn from them and hopefully teach them by virtue of how we behave in interaction with them. I have, it's giving away some secrets here, but in the course of my learning, I was provided with the opportunity to essentially be in isolation for about 10 years. Not, I wasn't a recluse or anything, but very limited demands upon me to interact with the world around me. And I had a very active higher consciousness being that was service to self that constantly intruded to try to interfere with my learning and my healing and so forth. And I realized that the more I resisted that, the more strength that it gave them. And when I reached a point where learning from the Buddha's teachings, actually, and began to recognize them as a friend, because what they were doing was bringing into my awareness what I needed to heal. All that they could do was play upon my distortions of perception in order to control me. And so when I became aware of those distortions of perception and surrendered those distortions of perception, they had nothing to work with. But more than that, when I redirected the conversation to their own healing in communication, then they went away, because that depolarized them. That lowered their echelon within their hierarchy, because it depleted their source of intelligent energy.
Yeah, they didn't have any interest in doing that, I guess. Yeah.
No.
I think that's an interesting approach. One of the things I hear some of these dark ones is that, this is for your own benefit, your own evolution, right? We're here to play the bad guy because, then if you don't have a crisis, you won't grow. So they kind of justify their behavior by saying, we're going to play this part and nobody wants to, you're just going to be asleep.
Right.
If we don't do anything to shake you out of your slumber, and unfortunately the only way to do that is to do all these horrendous acts, to wake you up, to make you think twice about what you know. And it's an interesting point. However, I don't think that's the most wholesome, skillful way to justify, horrendous actions and things like that. Now,
Yeah.
eventually, I kind of see your point that we won't need any kind of just say low-level teaching mechanisms like this to grow and expand in consciousness or to do types of inner work. So, what would you say to that kind of? I would just call it false justification with a kind of a groan that, well, I don't know, kind of thing,
Well, for most people, think of the effect of that, the general effect, and I see this as a mental health counselor, the almost invariably the underlying condition that most people function within is that they're not good enough, that they're inadequate. And so consequently, while you maintain that subconscious, if not conscious, perspective of yourself, then you are severely limiting your capacity to advance along the enlightenment path.
And this is an inferior ego. This is still ego. This is still conceit. Thinking
Yeah.
I'm not good enough. That's normally we think of conceit as, I'm better than, but not good enough. That's a conceit too. It's
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, really.
I love Carla Ruckert that channeled the raw material. Had a funny story. She said she was working really, really hard on losing her pridefulness. And so she had worked on it for about 6 months, and then she had this realization, I think that I've really mastered my pridefulness. And then it dawned on her, wait a minute, I'm proud that I surrendered my pridefulness. So,
right. Yeah,
so that additional awareness was just hilarious.
Well, the ego just turns into a spiritual ego then, right?
Right,
I've gotten rid of most of the standard ego. Now it's just a spiritual ego that trying to get under control of.
We qualify with a different adjective.
Right. So, but you bring up that material, and I was just curious on your take of it, and I read it years ago, and what I don't really see mentioned a lot here in that, or when people recount it, is all the things, all the kind of challenges, let's just put it that way. I mean, it seemed like she went through a lot of bodily illness, I think, and a lot of like mental suffering going through this. And what is your take on this? Because the channeling, I think it seems really dangerous a lot of times. I mean, what came out of it, I guess, was really useful and helpful. But the things she had to go through to get, I mean, what was going on there? Do you know? And what do you recommend about channeling too? Because isn't this a potential for something to come in and take over someone that they, a bad actor that. They don't really know, and they're not some of the channelers seem to not really be in some kind, not that there's any then this plays into free will or kind of control or agency, but what are your views on this?
Channeling is not for everyone, and it usually those people that channel have a pre-incarnate agreement that they will participate in a way in the channeling. Even so, the majority of those who do have the capacity to be a vocal channel have not trained themselves to tune themselves and to recognize the contact that they're making. No channel is going to just talk to anybody and everybody that contacts them, because it is, for most people, very difficult to distinguish the service to self higher entities that are seeking to dominate and subjugate, and those that are offering positive quality information. And so until they go through that process of learning, and like everything else, you get burned, with your efforts and concentrate your efforts on really learning how to do it and establishing a relationship with the entity that you're communicating with. But there are lots of good channels, and some of them are not consistent. They, don't recognize that negative influence. But more and more are becoming available because of the transitions that we're experiencing as a population. We There's a very high probability, they don't predict the future, but there's a very high probability that we are going to begin having actual visitations from other galactic entities, in such a way that nobody's going to be able to qualify it as swamp gas or anything like that. I mean, they're going to be landing in city parks and government buildings and things of that nature. Because of the transitions that as a population that we're undergoing, it's time to integrate us more into the universal population,
So,
and dispel a lot of these hegemonies that have been perpetrated by the service to self.
so when we're talking about disclosure like this, but that sounds even more beyond disclosure. That sounds like contact, right? Mass contact. Do you see this playing out in the 3D? Like, there's not little green men, but like, explain, how that plays out. Are there going to be different races like Arcturians, Syrians, tall Nordics?
My understanding is initially they're going to be the ones that look like us. There are many civilizations around the galaxy that use the same body types that we do, and those will probably be the initial ones until we acclimate a little bit more to them.
And they will come in a craft then? Is that how people
they'll
will
come
know then?
and that's how they've done it in the past. It just, we require that. We require that physical identification.
How will we know that's not like different from a government project that's either reverse engineered or
it'll be real obvious.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be real obvious. Yeah, the government has a lot of nifty things that they've acquired from other civilizations over the years that we're generally not aware of, but these will be outstandingly different,
because there's such a huge level of secrecy, and then there's this even just Project Bluebeam that we've heard about years ago, that like a fake alien invasion to whip up an external threat that's fake and maybe hologram in order to justify more war, perhaps a one world order, one world government, these types of things that have been talked about before. So
one of the things that the visitors fear is being shot at. Wait a minute, we don't want to get shot at, so we need to put up some protections.
Good point. Now I want to go back to the intelligent energy that the service to self beings are feeding on. Would that be what some people call loosh? And then, even if not, how does that work? How does that act as a sustenance for them?
We have a constant flow of intelligent energy. That's the energy that flows through us when you're in meditation and you tune yourself to be in that higher vibrational state, and you can feel that energy flowing through you. When and a lot of times it appears as you can, and I have done this, you can step outside of your body and look down at your body, and it is a really beautiful royal blue energy that when you die, that leaves, that energy leaves, and it is required for a constant source of all the fifth down through first density, and when you don't have that, then your consciousness pattern just merges back with the vastness. In other words, the individuality that you've created disappears. It's still absorbed into the creator. There's no loss of the creator, but as far as your identity, it does just kind of disappear.
So before we start wrapping up here, I wanted to ask about co-creation. You talked about a creator, infinite creator, and analog. I didn't even go into all the intricacies of that, so I'm just going to leave that be, because that's it's kind of beyond my pay grade to really even almost follow you along with that. So that's a whole another line of inquiry. But this co-creation, talk a little bit about that. We hear in kind of more new agey spiritual circles about co-creation. How is that similar and different from just regular creation?
We perceive ourselves as separate autonomous entities. When we adjudicate a thought, that is a co-creation, because it is amending our perception of self, and we are exploring ourselves uniquely. There's no duplication in all throughout creation. There's no reason for that. Our experiences are unique, not because the experience itself is unique, but because our interpretation of that is unique. And we think generally we think of advancement along the Enlightenment path to be flat, to be vertical and horizontal, but it's actually three-dimensional. So as we explore awareness, our task is to explore it ever deeper through the perspective that we have created by this perception of an autonomous self. And so that is the real advantage that, generally speaking, we're not aware of. But what we are doing as we assume control of ourselves and assume responsibility for our own advancement along the Enlightenment path, we begin to incrementally explore awareness deeper and deeper and deeper.
I also wanted to ask one more thing, throw in here, Dean. Time has just flown completely by here, and it's got so much we just talk about all day long. How about some practical perceptions or ways of looking to help start collapsing this notion of separation? That there is this interconnectivity, that there is no separation, there's this interdependence going on too. Do you have any perceptual techniques, or how would you help those out there see things more in this interconnected way, this non-separative way?
Well, first of all, understand that our learning is achieved by feeling. It's not an intellectual process. The more intellectual exercise you give it, the less you understand. You can put the pieces together after you've felt it. And so as you go into this inward exploration of the self, and you become aware of the thoughts that you're attracting, and we attract thoughts, we don't create thoughts. We attract the thoughts, and the nature of the thoughts that you are creating, and your openness to awareness of who you are. And there is a distinct pattern of progression that we will follow in this range of consciousness. We begin with hedonistic behavior, and someone who is locked into that hedonistic behavior is most likely choosing that service to self path. But as we make progress, then we are surrendering those perceptions of autonomy to the point that our behavior transforms. Someone that we recognize as having ethics and morality and caring for others, and those qualities that generally we admire as a population, is evidently they're behaving in a way that they have surrendered a lot of those perceptions of autonomy. That progresses into even more basic things of surrendering perceptions of sexual gender or race, or even you surrender the authenticity of your body, and you recognize just a beingness without physical attachment. And so that's really about all we can hope for achieving in this range of consciousness. But we pick up the next range of consciousness where we left off. So there's much more in the range of consciousness. But in the next range of consciousness, we will surrender the perception of the autonomy of the physical, and we will no longer need to reincarnate.
Well, this has been fascinating as the other times I've talked to you, Dean. I really appreciate you. It almost felt like I was grilling you here.
I,
While
I,
I just have this insatiable kind of truth seeking, and I just any kind of knowledge and learning and different access that comes to these things that can get closer and closer to seeing things how they actually are. All for it, and especially if
I,
it's for our benefit and the benefit of others, especially in the long term, is even more so. So yeah, you were saying.
I was just going to say I am always available to you and to your audience, to pursue these topics in whatever depth or degree that I'm able, and hopefully are providing your audience with some information that will get them excited about going ever deeper and exploring themselves.
I appreciate that, and at the very least, it's me. So, and then people like even contact in daily life. Uh, can perhaps benefit, from one way or the other from it. So
Yeah,
great. So, Dean, tell people how they can get in touch with you if you're open to that too.
sure.
Your website, your new book that I actually mentioned by the title, The Enigma of Consciousness, right?
Right.
And your other books, other projects, you're a podcast host too. So anything else you want to plug, and then leave if you'd like to leave folks with a message today. Final message.
Okay, I would love to. I have a website that you can contact me through the website. It's very simply the initial D, deangraves.org. D. Dean Graves is just all one word. And it has my contact information, and it has the reference to the books and other services that I can offer. I have 4 books. The most recent one is The Enigma of Consciousness, a spiritual exploration of humanity's relationship to creation. And it explains in much more detail than what we can cover in a verbal communication of all that we've talked about today and much more. I have 3 other books that if you're going to read the Enigma of Consciousness, the only other one that would possibly be more strategic to helping people heal themselves is the identity model, understanding and healing stress and suffering. The other 2, if you're going for the last book, the other 2 are precursors, or they're primers for that. Other projects, I have Chatting with the Arcturians, which is an open channel that we talk with the Arcturians. They're my only guest, and so they rely, I rely on them, but they're providing essentially verification of this information. Then they have a little bit different slant on it, as you and I have a different
Sure.
slant on the same thing, and they, as a civilization, have a little bit different slant, but it's the same information.
Well, very cool. May all you realize, ultimate consciousness. I don't know what to say here. I almost sound like whatever I'm going to say here at my ending is not going to do it. So I will just leave you all to explore the true nature of consciousness, the enigma of consciousness, for your benefit and for the benefit of all beings everywhere. May all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free.